Welcome back, Death Toll Racing. So we are back on the Safari wagon. This is episode 2 of doing the PSI wiring on our LT motor. It's an L83. We have the wiring at this point all the way through the car. So we're going to be doing the car connections today. We already have the accelerator pedal. That's as simple as just plugging it in after we got it mounted. We got that all mounted last episode. So we're going to be working on getting the connectors made, and so what we're going to be doing is adding a weatherpack connector so that we can do a quick uninstall of this harness when we want. We're doing this a little differently. Normally you would have the harness installed in the car and then you would just plug the motor in. I'm doing it so that we can leave the wiring on the motor and unplug the car and take the harness with the car, with the engine, instead of staying with the car. So it's a little bit backwards, so we're doing it a little different. So everything we're doing inside the car now, we're gonna do so that we can easily unplug it, because we have this removable center that we can just throw the harness in on the transmission, yank the whole thing out as one. Because we do plan on upgrading this car in quite a few ways as time goes on. That's probably PSI, so I'm going to answer it so we can figure out what I have a mystery connector that I don't know what it does. So this is the mystery connector that they just called me about, and what it is this is for the shift computer. Guys who are familiar with the automatic, I don't ever do automatics, so I didn't know what this thing was. So anyway, that's what that is. The tan wire would have been for your your paddle shifter or whatever. That's what was coiled up there, and I just put that back in the loom. I put some heat shrink on it, put it back in the loom so it's out of the way, and I'm just going to tuck this up. The next time we pull this harness out, when we pull the engine, transmission, everything, when we're doing an upgrade, I'm going to remove this from the harness all the way. We have enough wires up in here. We don't need extra ones that don't do anything. Okay, so very first thing I'm going to do is label all the wires. This just makes it a lot easier as you go. My harness is so simple because I'm not really doing much with it. I only have 3 wires inside, but I just put not used on all the other ones, just so I'm never left scratching my head and having to go back and forth. Here I'm going to show you how to make a Delphi connection. This is a Delphi weather pack that I'm showing you here, and I'm showing you the male inner pin, the metal part, goes in the male housing on these ones, and then the female in the female housing, and then that's opposite of the cheaper ones that I got to the right there, and I'm going to show you those ones in a second. Those ones work good as well. But so to put them on, you strip it back about 3/16, maybe a little less. There's 3 different gauge ranges of those connections. So if you're using this middle one, you obviously would use the middle crimper on it, and they crimp really good. You can see that. I do not recommend soldering those unless you completely are not very confident in your crimp, but those crimps are really good. They will not pull out of there, I can promise you. They'll tear and stuff before then. And then you do a second crimp around the rubber seal. So it goes with that shoulder obviously towards the connector, so that that rubber seal, that crimp goes around that rubber seal, and then you just push them in. It doesn't matter how they're clocked on the Delphi ones, because everything's round. You can just push them in however, there's no orientation, and then that's the release tool. It slides over. It works on both the male and the female pins. And I'm going to show you there. It slips right over. That's the female pin there. It still fits over that one as well. It just pushes back the detent so you can pull it out. Really slick. These ones, so you can take these ones apart and service them if you accidentally put them in the wrong hole or whatever. That is not the case when it gets to these cheaper ones. Those ones are very hard to take apart without damaging something. It can be done. But it's almost just worth cutting it off and starting over. And they're so cheap you could do it 6 or 7 times before you're at the cost of a Delphi one. So anyway, these ones are the same. You don't strip out quite as much. They don't have quite as big of a grip area on the wire in the crimp zone there. So you only need to strip back about 1/8 of an inch. If you go too much, it won't fit in the connector. Just as a warning, it won't click in. But you push the rubber thing on the same way, so the shoulder's pointing towards the stripped wire. Put it on there. So that the long flags are over the shoulder there of the rubber seal. and then the other flags are over the wire, the bare wire, and then you crimp them the same. So there's only one size of these, so it's generally you use the second step on these ones. They don't have a bigger one than that, and they actually don't have a smaller one either. So you're kind of using that one no matter what, but you can use the smaller crimp on them. I've done that a number of times when I'm doing like communication wire. And then you use the front circle crimp on those crimpers to do the seal, to crimp around the seal ring. That just shrinks it in. So now this is where they're directional, and it's really hard to see because it's so small and it's so deep in there. It can only fit in there one way. I had it upside down, so I had to flip it 180. And then I finally got it to push in. Once you get it right, it pushes right in. But, you know, these cheaper ones, they're cool. But again, you can't take them apart once you push that in. If you push it in the wrong hole, you're going to have a hard time getting it apart without damaging it. So that's that. So the Delphis are a lot easier, a lot better, a lot higher quality. But there is a place in everyone's shop for those cheaper ones. That's you've probably seen those a number of times on fog lights and HID conversions and all that stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with them. A lot of those come with those that style of connection. So now the reason I was showing you that for one is you need to do that exactly what I just did for the Delphi, the weather pack. That's what this Eaton panel takes as far as the inserts. That's the crimping and the seal are the same, and you have to push those in the relay panel according to directions for the fuel pump. So we have our feed line going in and our out line to the fuel pump going out, and now I'm just pushing the relay in. And that's very, very well spelled out in the directions as far as what two terminals those go in. The only confusion on those is you don't know on these LT motors, they take the fuel pump module out of them. So you have to actually run a regulated fuel pressure fuel pump to it. So that basically, that is just, you're going to have the fuel pump on or off with the engine running. That's all that relay will do. It no longer controls fuel pressure like the factory one would. So you need a regulated fuel pump, a regulator after the fuel pump for that. And we'll get into that when we go to do it. Now I'm just wiring in Delphi connections here and making my own harness. Again, I only use, I use two of that big loom, two of the connectors in the big loom, and then the red wire I tie in with it. I should have ran that down that loom while I was in there, but I didn't. But that one goes there. That red wire is the ignition wire. The other ones are brake light and check engine light, and I ran those across the car, and we'll hook those up here in a second. And then I took that back off because I wanted to run everything kind of through it differently. I'm just basically changing the orientation and looming stuff. I wasn't making any connection changes. And then I ended up throwing that one. That's the one that was dangling down there. That's the fuel pump one that we just made. I ended up putting that one up through so it's out the top, and we're going to hook to that one on the next episode when we're doing fuel system. So now I'm making a little harness that this is the one that's going to plug into that connector. It's going to run across the car. So I matched the colors up as best I could to the PSI harness. We have a brown and white one, which is the check engine light, and I used a brown, just a solid brown one for that. And then I have the yellow one, which is the brake light. I used yellow on that. And then the red one is the ignition, and we're going to get into testing that right now. And that's the sound you hear. And so we're just using an ohm reader, and that's the sound you hear. Okay, so there's ignition on, and we need to make sure it also has ignition while we're starting, which it does. And then off. Nothing on accessory. So that's perfect. That's exactly how we need it to work. I am going to replace this switch, but the new switch should work the same way. But that you can hear that is not the cleanest connections in the world. All right, and here I am installing the MIL light. That's the check engine light. That's the brown wire that we ran across there. It is controlling the ground of the light bulb. So the other side of the light bulb is going to go to the ignition source. Another ignition wire going to that. You can use whatever type of bulb you want. That won't matter. I found an old school trucker one that I'm going to use on this. It matches the dash really well. It fits the era. It's pretty cool. The bulb bulb is actually changeable from the passenger side, from the top side there. So it's a pretty cool switch. So I install that, and again, the computer's controlling the ground side, not the positive side. All right, so now we're into the brake switch, and this is where this could vary depending on what type of engine you're putting in your car. LS engines and stuff require a special brake switch, and it's not really special, but it needs to have a ground going to it while the brakes aren't applied, and then positive while the brakes are applied. So it needs a special switch, and I believe what they're using is just a PSI sells them, but I believe it's just the switch that for the early overdrive transmissions with lockup converters. Those switches did that. So it looks the same, but it has 4 terminals off the side instead of the 2 terminals off the back, like mine has there. So on mine, it's the white wire is going to the tail lights. I believe that's pretty common, and that's what I tapped into. I needed to do a little repair on my wiring because someone had put a brake controller, I believe, in at one point, and they had a bunch of splices and stuff in there. So I cut those out, and then just used heat shrink connectors to add my wire in that harness that we just made going to the computer. Okay, so we are on to the speedometer stuff. I probably should have just broke this out into its own episode because this is kind of going to be a long take, so bear with me here. So we are going factory cable style drive, but we need to tell the engine, or the engine ECU, vehicle speed. It has to know that. You can't skip this step. I don't think. I don't know what would happen if you did, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be good. Things wouldn't work right. So what has to happen is you have to generate a pulse via a pulse generator. So this just screws onto the speedometer where the cable would go. It's made by Dakota Digital. It's 128,000 pulse per mile. This 128,000 pulse per mile is what the engine computer is basically expecting. And then obviously it's within range because tire size, axle ratio, you're telling the computer that. So 128 pulse per mile-ish. And then it has wiring. It's not as simple as just plugging that thing in and plugging the wiring harness in, unfortunately. But it's not much more complicated than that. You just have to wire a little bit. So this just plugs into the sender. You have ignition, ground, and then this white wire is where we're going to have to splice in to the factory harness where the speed sensor was. I got one sitting here. This isn't the one we're using, but it's the same. This is a factory harness. So you got a purple wire and a black wire on the factory harness. On the PSI harness, it's a purple wire and a green wire with a black stripe. This is actually a black wire with a green stripe, so it's just opposite. But either way, you only need the purple wire. The black wire we're just not going to use. You just tape that one back. So that'll get cut off. We'll wire the white wire to the purple wire, and then cap off the other wire and just seal it back under the loom. You don't need it anymore. And so that's it. So that's going to generate, as long as your speedometer gear and stuff is pretty close, that's going to get your computer probably relatively close enough. If you're running an electronic transmission and none of that applied to you, but you still want to run your mechanical speedometer, that's where this next step will cross over to everybody. So this is a Dakota Digital ECD 200BT. It is a cable driver. This is going to drive our mechanical speedometer via this short 2-foot long cable. This cable may vary depending on what application you buy it for. I need the threaded 5/8 threaded GM style. GM also used a push-on style with a metal tab that I can't stand. And then you got the Ford ones with the white plastic clip that always seems like it should be broken, but they actually seem to hold up all right. So you have those 3 styles. Mopar guys, you hit the road, man, you're not invited into this club. I think you actually, Mopar guys, I'm pretty sure you just use this GM threaded. Check under your hood. I guarantee you can make it work one way or another. Mopar guys are always forgotten about for some reason. I want to build a Mopar now just because everything I do is like, Mopar guys are forgotten. You got Ford, you got GM, and then Mopar guys. Hit the road. So anyway, this thing works via multiple ways, but we're going to use it ODB2. It just plugs in ODB2, and then you have to give it ignition again, ground, and then this fancy orange wire here, that's going to go to a button, and it's just a button, nothing special about it. And the other end of that button goes to ground. So you're basically just giving ground to this orange wire, and that's going to go through your menu that has a tiny little LCD display that you can't even see on camera, but and that'll just get you into the right settings, because you actually use a Bluetooth to set it up, but you don't have to. I'm pretty sure you can do it without the Bluetooth, just using that button and then driving, hitting the button again. You drive a mile, hit the button again, that type of thing. So anyway, the brown wire is for if you're not running the ODB2, that would be hooked to your speed sensor. We're not doing it that way, so that one will just get capped back. So there's 3 wires on here, plus the other wire that goes to a ground on that button. Simple as that. Then this thing is only adjustable within 25%. So it can only adjust up to 25% plus or minus. So you have to be relatively close. 25% is a lot, but you have to be relatively close on what your vehicle computer speed says it is to make this to be an adjustable range for this guy. If you have a tuner and you can just play with that on that side, then you'll never have to touch your gear down here if you're doing it the way I'm doing it with the speedometer gear. But if we're not close, we may have to change out that gear or really cheat with a tuner. Our settings, you know, axle ratio, tire size, we'll have to really cheat on that to get us close. Most likely you'll be close. If you're running a electronic transmission where you're just plugged in and you're doing this, you're probably going to be pretty close, and then you will just adjust it through via, if it's not within range, you'll adjust the computer via a tuner. Hopefully you have a tuner at that point to get you within range, but you'll have to adjust your axle ratio and stuff. If you ordered a PSI harness and they tuned your computer, they're going to ask you your axle ratio and your tire size, so you'll be spot on. And calibrating this pretty much is nothing. You don't really have to do it because if your computer's spot on, this will be spot on from the factory. I'm pretty sure, from what I can tell. So yeah, that being said, I'm going to hit this up in the morning and we'll get wiring this thing up. It's pretty simple, obviously. It shouldn't take us long. Most of our time is going to be figuring out where to put this thing and reaching up there and screwing the cables in. So we'll see you again in the morning, which is going to be right now. Okay, here it is hooked up. So I got it plugged in, the cable ran up, I got it zip tied to there, and then this is the ground. So I put it into a weather pack, and then I have the ground wire going to the case there, and then the red wire is running up in the engine compartment. I'll show you that here in a second. And the purple wire, that's the purple wire from the factory harness. This is actually the factory harness's loom, and I just added that red wire to it. That's the ignition wire for that sender. Here's the other end of the loom. That's the factory PSI loom for the speed sensor. And then now that's our red wire. The red wire, remember, is the ignition wire. So that's going to go to the car's ignition wire. That's the only thing that wire in the engine compartment is going to be used for. We are going to put a weather pack connector at the top for all the connections from the car to this engine. So it's just one and done, unplug it, and we can pull the motor. There's one more wire that's going down to the starter. Remember the purple wire? So that's going to get loomed with this one, and then tie into that harness so it can go with the motor, and then the car side will be on the other side of the connector up there. And then the other 2 wires, because I'm pretty sure this is how it is, I lost the engine compartment harness for this car. I don't know where it went. I'm afraid I left it on the engine, but I got rid of it. I'm not sure. So I ordered a new one, reproduction one. We're gonna have to modify the crap out of it because we don't need so much of it. But anyway, it has the power that feeds the fuse panel, I believe, is in that harness that goes to the alternator. And I think it has 2 like 12 gauge wires. I'm pretty sure 2 12 or 10 gauge wires going in. So those will be there. We may have to put them on their own connection depending on the gauge and the amperage draw that those are going to have. We may have a separate connector, so there may be 2 engine compartment connectors that we have to undo. But we'll see when we get that harness what that's going to look like. All right, and so now on to the cable driver. I'm voiding my warranty, and I just cut mine short. I didn't need so much wiring on it. I don't like having wiring just coiled up places. So I cut it short, and I soldered everything together. I put on one of those cheaper weather connections on it. That's just for the power in the ground. And then the button I hardwired into the wire wiring there. Remember, the button goes to the orange wire, and then the other side of the button goes to a ground. And then I just mounted it up on the heater box right next to the relay panel. And grounded the wires. I put ring terminals on it and just grounded it to the same screws that I'm holding the cable driver up with. So then I just have to run over, the only wire left is the ignition wire. So I just have one more ignition wire I have to hook up to the ignition. So when I get my new switch, it's going to have a lot of wires going to it. I may end up having to put a little switch bank or a little relay bank or something up there somewhere, because there's quite a few wires on the ignition already, and we just added 3. Okay, so that pretty much finishes up that harness. Other than that engine compartment connection that we still need to do with the red wire, which is the ignition wire going down to that pulse generator, that's going to go to the coil wire that would have went to the coil once I get that new harness. And then we got the purple wire going to the starter, and again, when we get that new harness, we'll do that. And then we're going to splice it, split it in the middle, so that half the harness will stay with the engine, half the harness will stay with the car, with a weatherpack connector. And then also we have the wires going into the fuse panel are also in that harness, I believe. Those go down to the alternator. That's where they're going to get their battery, and obviously we have to put a battery connection on that alternator as well. So we'll have to do that, and that's kind of more finishing touch stuff towards the end, is when I start running battery cables and stuff. I'm not gonna do that right now. So anyway, when we get the fuel system going on that, I'm hoping I'll get that harness so we can finish that stuff up, and so we're just completely basically done with the wiring on this car. I was gonna point out something on this thing. So my interior engine compartment wiring was very simple. Yours may have more wires hooked up. You saw a lot of those got cut back and just shortened up, and because we didn't use them. I only really actually used 3 out of that main harness. There was 3 that were in that big loop, or 2 in that big loop, and then the red wire, which I tied into that loop, and then we put that weatherpack connector on with the 3 terminals. Yours may be more complicated. You could be controlling fans, which would be the white and black and the blue and red, or you could be controlling other things. If you're on automatic, you'd obviously have that one connector that I didn't know what it was. You would plug that in. I think there would probably be additional wires maybe for that. I don't know, maybe not, maybe there wouldn't. The tan wire you would be hooking up if you were going to use some sort of a paddle shifter type thing. But anyway, yours could have had more connections than that, but either way, they're labeled right here. It's all in the same group, and so that's how you go through and hook it up. That brake switch, I was telling you about the brake switch. Here's where they have it laid out. This is the one I was telling you about where it's grounding. This is what I believe is the one for an old lockup converter, like an early 700R4 or whatever. This is that switch. They don't have you wiring it for grounding and stuff. In this situation, if you're doing an older LS and stuff, there'll be a little bit additional wiring there. This is wiring the relay. If you're unfamiliar with that for the fans, they tell you exactly how to do that and which wires to use out of that previous page I just showed you. And then this is for getting the tack going. We may do this later, and this is how you get a tack. It does involve putting a resistor in. That's actually really simple. They're color coded for what they do, and that's where we did the relay for the fuel pump. That's just the directions on that, and then this is inside the cover there telling you what the fuses and stuff do in your particular harness. So anyway, next week we're going to do fuel system and then hopefully finish up all the wiring, so we're done. I also downloaded that Dakota Digital app. That's what it looks like when it's on. Anything you try to do, it's going to try to look for it, but obviously it's not on, so it can't find it. But next week we're going to be doing fuel system. And then after the fuel system, I'm going to start plumbing up all the power steering, the hydro boost, and all that stuff, and get all that done. So that's done, and then we can start dropping the radiator in, figuring out where the radiator hoses and stuff. I don't think I bought anything for radiator hoses yet. We're going to have to do those on our. We're going to have to figure those out as we go. And then we're actually going to be getting pretty close to starting it, because we're going to have a fuel system, we're going to have a cooling system, we have it all wired, so we're getting close. So then we'll probably do exhaust, because I don't want to start it without exhaust on it, especially with just the manifolds. So we're going to do exhaust, and then it'll be ready to start. So we're actually getting really close to starting it. I don't like rushing in. I know a lot of guys like to rush it in just to get it started for motivation or whatever. I don't like doing that. I'm going to get the thing pretty much done so we can start it and actually let it run for a little bit, and make sure everything's going to be good on it. that way. So anyway, that's what's coming up. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned. I'm going to be putting a thumb on the excavator tomorrow, I hope, on that JCB. It's a mechanical thumb. It's actually really cool, whether you're a tractor guy or not. I'm kind of excited about it, but apparently, according to the guy, they're really strong, and we can squeeze the roof off a car and stuff with it. So anyway, stay tuned for that. So that'll be coming up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.